Good evening. I'm KARE 11 meteorologist Belinda Jensen. We are under a weather impact alert between now and 9 o'clock tomorrow morning for the chance of freezing rain and freezing drizzle as the temperature sits right on the cusp of freezing overnight. So some slick conditions as you get up tomorrow morning. We'll have all the details coming up in a few moments.
Also tonight, in light of massive fraud scandals enveloping the state, Governor Walz bows out.
Minnesota faces enormous challenges this year, and I refuse to spend a single minute doing anything other than rising to meet this moment.
Tonight, reaction to the shakeup in Minnesota politics as Walz ends his re-election campaign. And Venezuela's president arraigned today in a U.S. court on a slew of charges, his defiant response. And how the actions in Venezuela could impact local economics and travel. Plus, a couple who's visited every city in the state of Minnesota shares the lessons they've learned from their great Minnesota road trip.
KARE 11 News at 6 starts now.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Julie Nelson. We are covering several big stories tonight, including a weather impact alert that starts now. Rain and tonight's cold temperatures could make for a slick morning commute. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, a major shakeup to the gubernatorial race in Minnesota, as Tim Walz announced he is dropping out of the race, ending his bid for a historic third term. This comes amid the massive fraud scandal across Minnesota's state programs and increased scrutiny of Walz himself, with critics saying he turned a blind eye to fraud. Our team coverage includes Lou Raguse with reaction from state leaders and Danny Spiewak at the Capitol with everything you need to know about the governor's race moving forward. Let's start with Danny.
Well, today, reading a statement to the press here at the Minnesota State Capitol, Governor Walz accused Republicans, both at the federal level with President Trump and state Republicans, of, in his mind, politicizing the issue of fraud, saying that they were weaponizing fraud for political gain. But in that statement, he also admitted and really acknowledged that the attention around fraud had become a distraction for his campaign and was the #1 factor why he decided that he's not going to seek a third term later this year in November of 2026. It was back in September that Governor Walz announced his intentions to run for a third term. But over the last several weeks, his administration's handling of fraud has really been in the national spotlight, amplified by President Trump's comments about Somali Americans, and more recently a viral video by a conservative influencer who had visited Minnesota daycare sites. Walz said today that he still believes he would win if he ran, but that he no longer feels he can effectively campaign with everything going on and all the attention around the fraud issue. It is truly a stunning development for a governor who just a little more than a year ago was his party's vice presidential nominee.
I'm passing on this race with zero sadness and zero regret. I did not run for this job to have the job. I ran for the job to do the job. Minnesota faces enormous challenges this year, and I refuse to spend a single minute doing anything other than rising to meet this moment.
Now, of course, the big lingering question is which Democrats will run for governor in Minnesota with Tim Walz out. Well, sources close to U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar say that she is strongly considering a run and, of course, has a lot of statewide appeal and has won by very large margins in many of her races since going to Washington over the last 4 terms as a senator. So we'll have to keep an eye on any announcement that comes from her. She posted a social media post praising the governor today, but did not confirm whether she's running for governor in 2026. Back to you.
Thank you, Danny. Our team coverage continues now with Lou Raguse as leaders on both sides of the aisle are reacting to this massive shakeup in politics. Lou?
Julie, Walz's political opponents did not seem surprised by the decision, considering how the national focus on fraud has ramped up over the last few weeks. His political allies laud him for putting the state ahead of his own ambitions.
I am absolutely confident a Democratic and a DFLer will hold this seat come November.
Upon hearing the news of Governor Tim Walz's withdrawal from the campaign,
he is dodging this.
His 2022 opponent said what many Republicans might be thinking.
This could be one of those situations where Republicans might need to recognize that they should be careful what they wish for.
Dr. Scott Jensen believes Walz was a vulnerable candidate, easier to beat than Senator Amy Klobuchar should she enter the race.
I mean, Senator Klobuchar enjoys the respect of millions of Minnesotans.
Political analyst Blois Olson, who broke Walz's news over the weekend, agrees.
In the last week, it was clear Republicans were worried that he would drop out and they would miss their chance to run against him.
Are you disappointed at all?
No, it's a victory for Minnesotans. We all along were ready to defeat Tim Walz, and he took himself out before we had to do it.
But other GOP candidates like Representative Kristen Robbins and Lisa Damuth believe fraud will remain a key issue in the race and that voters trust them for solutions.
Regardless of who is going to be running on the Democrat side in 2026, I think the voters have started to send that clear message with the explosion of the fraud and the focus on it. Minnesotans are paying closer attention to what is happening to their tax dollars.
Senate Majority Leader Aaron Murphy, who ran against Walz in the 2018 DFL primary, says the DFL has passed meaningful legislation on fraud and the GOP has not. She says Walz's decision underscores his commitment to servant leadership.
That kind of selflessness is rare in politics today, and I admire it. It stands out for me as something unique.
A spokesperson for Secretary of State Steve Simon told me today that Simon will not run for the Democratic nomination for governor if Amy Klobuchar enters the race. Attorney General Keith Ellison did not make that same commitment. Many people I talked to today assume that there will be some competition for Klobuchar among the more progressive wing of the party. Julie.
Well, and if we make that leap, which is not maybe a very big one, that she is going to run, she is incredibly popular, the most popular politician in Minnesota for years. So assuming she wins, what does that mean for her Senate seat?
Well, she would be able to appoint her replacement for her Senate seat, or there will be a replacement appointed for her until there will be a special election, which would be held then in November of 2027. So there'd be a special election before it aligns with the normal year that seat is up for election.
So I think that person would serve for 2 years and then be up for re-election, but that opens up a whole nother line of intrigue too politically in the state. Big day for sure here in Minnesota.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Lou. Former Republican Governor Tim Pawlenty also gave his perspective today about Tim Walz dropping out of the race and what it will mean for Republicans' chances if Senator Klobuchar enters it. You can watch the one-on-one between Pawlenty and Jana coming up on Breaking the News. Well, the Trump administration, which has blasted Tim Walz, released a statement this afternoon saying in part he should be apologizing to Minnesotans for allowing their tax dollars to be misused so badly. Went on to say dropping out of the governor's race won't shield Tim Walz from the consequences of his actions. Well, this week, that massive fraud scandal sweeping our state will take center stage in Washington, D.C. Investigative reporter A.J. Legault will be there to cover House hearings. He'll be live starting tomorrow and throughout the day on Wednesday. Well, there is a new surge of ICE activity in Minneapolis. NBC News confirmed with 2 senior DHS officials. The government is sending 2,100 officers and agents to the city. The operation reportedly began on Sunday and is growing. We're told Homeland Security investigators are also looking into fraud from a recent viral video that claims Somali-run daycares are receiving federal funding without providing services to any children. Right now, the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth and Families has ongoing investigations at 4 of the centers mentioned in that video. Well, right now let's turn to weather because we have a KARE 11 weather impact alert for rain that could start freezing and creating slick road conditions tonight and for the morning commute. Belle has details in the backyard. Hi, Belle.
Well, hi, Julie. You know what? Not only are we dealing with the potential for some rain, but as you noticed with that sky camera we just saw you, there is some fog developing. Basically, there's just a lot of moisture in the atmosphere, and we have temperatures that are just sitting at or just above freezing at the surface. Of course, colder aloft. So this is going to be potentially a slick night in a few spots. But what is good news is we're noticing that the amount of precipitation that was forecasted is not really developing as forecasted, meaning there would be less than we anticipated earlier today. So basically less slick spots. So we'll hope that that continues to occur. In the meantime, you should just watch out for it because between 9 o'clock tonight through noon tomorrow, the National Weather Service went ahead and put a winter weather advisory right in between where it's warm enough that it will be all rain and where it's cold enough that it would be snow to the north. So right now that rain is showing up, as you note, right here to our south and west. We'll watch as it gets closer to the Twin Cities with that temperature right on that cusp, as I mentioned, sitting right at 33 degrees. We'll have more details of what you what we can expect through the morning commute and beyond in just a few moments.
All right, thank you, Belle. And a reminder, you can always get weather updates and see live radar on KARE 11 Plus. Just download our app for your TV and scroll over to Weather Impact 24/7 to stream for free. Well, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife both pleaded not guilty to a multitude of charges, including narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine trafficking, and weapons offenses. Their court appearance today in New York comes after a surprise weekend operation where U.S. authorities captured the two in Caracas. At times in the 30-minute hearing, Maduro claimed he was kidnapped and is a prisoner of war. NBC News reports the trial will not likely begin until sometime early next year. Well, as the U.S. works to establish an interim government in Venezuela, there is concern about the safety and stability for U.S. citizens in the Caribbean. Gordon Severson has more from our newsroom. Gordon?
Yeah, Julie, this military operation happened during possibly the busiest time of the year for Caribbean travel. We have heard countless stories about travelers who were stranded when the airspace was shut down over the weekend. But travel experts say that decision was made out of an abundance of caution, and they don't expect to see any more closures in the coming weeks.
Obviously, the Caribbean is extremely popular in January.
Analyzing risks is what Dr. John Rose does for a living. He works with the Internova Travel Group, and based on what he's seen, he doesn't expect to see any long-term safety issues around the Caribbean.
I don't think there'll be any disruptions unless something escalates. There's no indication there's going to be escalation.
But he says travelers should expect to see increased security in the Caribbean as local governments are trying to work to make travelers feel safe and comfortable. Rose also expects many travelers will consider travel insurance to protect their trip.
It's very important that consumers understand, hey, canceling for fear is not covered.
He does still recommend travel insurance during this uncertain time because most policies do offer a lot of protection. And when it comes to gas prices,
in the short term, you're going to see no difference whatsoever in the price at the pump.
Matt McLean with Gas Buddy doesn't expect to see any major changes over the next year or so. And even if the U.S. decides to tap into Venezuela's oil infrastructure, he says it will take years to ramp up production. And the type of oil that is found in Venezuela is usually lower quality.
It's actually something called a heavy sour crude, and that is much more difficult to refine.
McLean says sour crude is often used to make diesel and jet fuel, and a stronger supply could eventually trickle down to the consumer.
It would be very beneficial for the nation as a whole to have cheaper diesel prices so that the shipping and the freight, which is factored into the cost of items that we pay on a store shelf, could slowly start to come down.
Tomorrow, Gas Buddy will release its annual gas price forecast for the year, and analysts gave me a little sneak peek saying the average price of a gallon of gas this year could dip under $3 a gallon, and it would be the first time that has happened since the pandemic. So in short, they say in the short term, analysts believe that the situation in Venezuela will have little to no impact on gas prices here in the U.S.
Interesting. Thank you, Gordon. Tonight, another school could be closing in the Robbinsdale district, dealing with a major budget deficit. And in sports, Will Hall joins us with the Vikings' uncertainty heading into the offseason. And later, a man's journey to all 856 officially recognized towns in our state. What drove him to take this great Minnesota road trip and his favorite spots along the way.